And we are going to move into the next part of the conversation, which is talking about national tax plans. And we have with us the campaigns manager from the Taxpayers Union, Louis Houlbrooke. Louis, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That's all right, man. I'm looking at your cool camera there. You've got like a close-up shot and a wide shot and everything going on at the same time.
Yeah, it's for big board meetings when there's multiple people. It actually does split screen, kind of like 24 with Jack Bauer, but all in our boardroom. It's not so great when it's just me though.
Yeah, but we get to see the whole room, and
Yes.
much like, and you are by yourself in a big wide room. How are you? Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming on board.
Thank you.
We wanted to talk a little bit about National Party and their tax policies, and it's really based around a conversation that was had with I guess Christopher Luxon in the weekend with Jack Tame. And I think what we're going to do to start off with is we're going to play sort of 90 seconds of that conversation, which is kind of the crux of part of the reason we're talking about this today. So let's all of us just enjoy 90 seconds of Mr. Luxon with Jack Tame, and then we'll come back to the conversation.
Under your tax plan, someone on the median wage in New Zealand would get about $800, $850 more a year. You as Prime Minister would get $18,000 more a year. Now, I'm going to throw a quote to you. The cost of living does disproportionately impact lower income people. That was from you. You opposed the winter energy payment. You opposed the minimum wage hike. You opposed the increase to benefits, which were all measures targeted at lower and middle income New Zealanders. But you support giving $18,000 more every year to someone on almost $500,000.
Jack, in a time of high inflation, why wouldn't you adjust your same tax system, make no more changes to it, just lift it today? I'm asking for a short-term thing that we can do to deal with inflation.
No,
right?
You're talking about the tax brackets. I'm talking about the top tax bracket that you're scrapping.
So the story on the 39%
right.
is pretty simple, which is we opposed it as it came through and the government implemented it in this parliament. And our view is very simple. We want Kiwis to be able to return to New Zealand who've got lots of skills to offer. We want migrants to be attracted here.
Let me ask this. Do you need $18,000 more a year?
I personally don't.
Okay, great. So what's
But
the
I'm
point?
telling you, when we get to the election, you'll see a fully costed tax and fiscal
Do you
plan.
think
So there you go. There's a clip of the conversation. I guess it's a conversation that's been going around the rounds, Louis. But I kind of wanted to take a step backwards first of all and go, you are a taxpayers union. That implies in its title that you want to do what's best for those of us paying tax. Would that be fair?
Yeah, well, our mission is lower taxes, less waste, and more transparency. So lower taxes, I think, is pretty clear.
Can you explain to me, in a real simple way, like I'm 5 years old, what is the purpose of tax?
Well, taxes to fund the basic services that taxpayers expect. And I guess that's defined through the democratic process. Some people have a larger expectation in terms of the services that they receive, which is why a lot of the time what we do at the Taxpayers Union is highlighting examples of government spending that people don't necessarily want to fund with their tax money. And there's a lot of it out there.
Can you give us a couple of examples of that?
Yeah, sure. In the COVID-19 response, 500 million was spent on arts grants. This was part of the COVID response. There's also $1.2 billion that was spent on jobs for nature. So these are things like wallaby culling programs that the people who are employed by these programs probably do support, but it's difficult to see how that ties into a COVID-19 response.
When you say that, you guys are working on behalf of taxpayers, and you're talking about like the expenditure that we don't want, you kind of said the wasted tax that we, the public, the taxpayers don't want. Who are you talking about exactly? Because I live in a part of the world where wallabies are an issue, and a part of the world in Otago where, where I do want kind of pest eradication. So when you say we don't want this, who exactly are you talking about?
It's probably fair to say I'm referring to our 170,000 subscribed supporters. So
Right.
These are people who have signed up to our mission of lower taxes, less waste, more transparency.
Right. So would that be, I'm just thinking this out loud, literally on the spot. Would that mean you're more kind of a lobby group for who you represent rather than a union for taxpayers in general?
Yeah, we call ourselves an advocacy group. In fact, we model ourselves in many ways off Greenpeace. But where Greenpeace cares about polar bears, we care about taxpayers.
You care about the taxpayers that are you part of your group, your subscribers? They're the one. Like, for example, most of the people who subscribe to you, would they be more, lower class, middle class, upper class, or class is the wrong word, income, lower income, middle income, upper income? Like, where would they sit mostly, your subscribers?
Yeah, that'd be above average. Disproportionately property owners. So rates issues are a huge issue for us. Definitely retired people, actually. So it's people who aren't necessarily income rich, but they do have assets. They've paid a lot of tax throughout their lives, and they're concerned about impending taxes on things like property.
Gotcha. So therefore, if we take those things together, when you say you kind of represent the people who are your subscribers primarily, and your subscribers are above average income and property owners, would it be fair to say that what you kind of push for in your advocacy is the wealthier end of society, homeowners, etc., and not necessarily, let's say, the beneficiaries in the world?
Well, what we push for is our mission of lower taxes, less waste, more transparency. And it's true that in terms of seeking feedback, we go to our people. We always go back to our mission. Is it in line with lower taxes, less waste, more transparency? And the reason we support that mission is because we think fundamentally that individuals can spend their money that they've earned better than elected governments who are subject to the whims of politics.
So why do you think it is that this National Party, based on what you've just said there about, individuals can spend their money better, is giving tax breaks in this current climate to the wealthy who don't need it, as just admitted by Mr. Luxon? He said, I don't need this money, as opposed to, dumping that 18,000 per annum onto a lower income person who desperately needs it, who then would be able to spend it, as you say, as they see fit. Why do you think the National Party is advocating for tax breaks for those who don't need it?
Well, I can't speak for Christopher Luxon, but there are very good arguments for his policy that we're actually disappointed that he's not making publicly. So we're looking at the 39% tax bracket, right? That's the somewhat controversial step that Jack Tame was focusing on. Now, removing that bracket, that just takes us back to where we were in 2017. In fact, it doesn't even quite get us back to that point. But the reason why we would support removing that bracket is because that's a marginal tax rate of 39% on any additional dollar that you earn. That has an incentive effect. So your incentive to be more productive is actually diminished by 39%. And I guess Chris Luxon did touch on the fact that we should be attracting international talent. But it's not just the 39% bracket that's the problem there. The 33% bracket, that kicks in at $70,000 of income. The 30% bracket, that kicks in at $48K. So he is right to focus on these brackets. He could probably go a little bit further.
Why do you think, and this I guess is part of your mission statement, that lower tax is better, when if you have a look at the OECD or the Western world, when the top tax breaks was ridiculously 70, 80, 90%, seems to be the time that these countries were most productive and wealthiest back in the time. So why does that equate to lower tax is better?
No, I just wouldn't accept that at all. I mean, countries are continuously getting more productive. New Zealand's certainly more productive than we were when we had taxes in the 70% range. The other thing that I'd say, though, is there is an element of tax competition internationally. If every OECD country has high taxes, then maybe that's not an issue in terms of competition. But nowadays, if we introduced a, say, 50% or 60% tax on the rich, we'd start seeing a flight of wealth from New Zealand to Australia and to Europe even, and so on.
But haven't we kind of got that now? Because taxes are cheaper in other places. They could go now and pay less tax. I mean, surely the only thing New Zealand has got is lifestyle. I mean, we can't be matched for incomes. We can't be matched for, location in the world to get to other places. None of those things we're ever going to win in. It's like, why do the All Blacks have to all play for New Zealand super franchise teams? Because it's the only way they can get that jersey. Like the jersey is dangled over them as, if you want this jersey, this black jersey, you have to stay in New Zealand. I feel like it's a bit the same with that, with our lifestyle, our location, our beaches, what we can offer that's non-financial is more likely to keep people here than an extra or fewer, tax percentage points.
I think it would be naive to rely on our lifestyle and our natural beauty alone. And countless places across the world could claim to have these attributes, but they're basket cases because they're not well managed economically. You can look at a lot of South American economies. So we absolutely do think the tax system should be used not just to attract talent, but to drive productivity. When you've got high tax rates of 30% or more, that is a killer for productivity.
Yeah, I realize that you and me are kind of dominating this conversation. I'll see if Chewy and George want to join in. Guys, you're more than welcome to. I don't want to be, I'm enjoying talking to Louis, but this is not our personal date here. You guys can jump in anytime you want as well.
The one point that I want to sort of poke you about.
You don't say
it's-
poke you when I've just said date. When I've just said
Answer
date, no, let's say poke you.
It always seems that there's a tax break aimed at the upper end, and yet the talking points are all talking about middle New Zealand. I'm middle New Zealand. I don't know what I'm going to do with $15 a week. I'm not interested. I'd much rather that be put into education or healthcare. I mean, the healthcare, my sister's a nurse, as an example, and she's gone right through this pandemic where they're going, oh, we'll get to your wage negotiation. We'll just get the pandemic out of the way, all the extra hours, all the extra work. We'll get to it, I promise. And then we're going to get into an election where that might go away as well. So when we're talking about tax brackets, why is it not that we adjust the middle and give more money into the pockets of more people rather than a smaller percentage at the top?
Sure. There's something of a mathematical answer to this, which is that it's actually quite cheap from a fiscal perspective to cut tax on the rich. It might seem counterintuitive because we think they pay so much tax, but there's so few of them. You can get a big bang for your fiscal buck, so to speak, by cutting that top tax bracket. Whereas if you, for example, introduced a tax-free threshold for, say, the bottom $20,000, which is something that would be very popular, that would cost many, many billions of dollars. So that's the fiscal reality of it. That said, though, what National's proposing and what we'd support, which is reversing the effects of inflation on tax brackets, that would benefit lower incomes as well. So, for example, the $48,000 tax bracket, any dollar that you earn over $48,000, you're paying 30% in marginal tax. Now, that bracket was set all the way back in 2010. In 2010, 48K was a pretty good salary. Now it's well below the average. So if we had adjusted that tax bracket for inflation, by now it would be at 59,000. Unfortunately, National's policy doesn't quite go that far. They don't completely fix that issue, but that's something we'd support.
I think I would agree with
that situation where you've just said, though. Oh, sorry, Joe. I was just saying, you come back to that situation where you've just basically said, giving it to the few at the top won't really impact society so much, but they're also the ones that need it. And if you gave it to the many at the bottom, it would cost us more, but would impact them in society more. So really, it's just a choice, isn't it? Giving it to the ones that don't need it, that's not going to cost that much, which is what you're saying, or giving it to the ones at the bottom, which will cost a lot, but will impact their lives exponentially better. I mean, it almost sounds like a moral issue to me, but I kind of cut you off, Joey. Sorry, you jump in there.
I have gone blank on the point that I was going to make now.
Sorry, dude.
Yeah, I guess you can look at our tax system as a means of redistributing income, which I guess a lot of people do see it that way. It's not necessarily the way that we see it, but that again is it's putting a moral lens on a system that actually has an effect on productivity. So if you redistribute to the point of destroying your national productivity, everyone ends up poorer, and that's not a desirable outcome. So yeah, we should cut taxes on all levels, but not to the point where we have to increase taxes on the most productive of our society just to compensate.
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
I think that's where I'll jump in.
You go, Joey. Yeah, you go, Joey.
I think that's my issue. Okay. Here in New Zealand, if you're wanting to invest and grow your money, the incentive seems to be on property, which is not productive. You've got people with massive portfolios and that sort of thing, and they're just stacking up their wages, stacking up their money, their savings, and that sort of thing, until they can cash out at some point. We don't seem to have as much of, I guess, a drive here, say, compared to the United States, where you invest in a business, you build a business up, or you do the stock market or something like that. So you've just taking tax away from people that are putting their money in a piggy bank. It's not productive money. It's just like most New Zealanders make their money from selling old houses to each other.
Yeah. I'd say two things to that. Firstly is that whenever we look at taxing property, we find there are always lots of loopholes, lots of complications. You see, even the Labour government's capital gains tax proposal, that excluded the family home, which arguably defeats the point of a capital gains tax when the primary asset in New Zealand actually is the family home. So you can immediately see the political difficulties by pleasing everyone without creating all these loopholes. The other thing I'd say is that on on housing specifically, a tax doesn't really answer the question of why our housing market has turned into an investment football. I mean, we'd say the real reason that people invest in housing is because housing is limited. There's a shortage of housing. When there's a shortage of something, it's like gold. It becomes a really stable asset. So maybe we should be addressing that shortage rather than trying to patch things over using our tax system.
I mean, to address that shortage, though, is a lot of government intervention. It seems to be the kind of thing that, in general, when you're talking about freedom to put your money where you want, rather than government wants to address that housing issue, to me would seem to be, would need a lot of, let's say, government pencils put on that scale. I did want to reference one thing, though, as well. You were talking about we don't want to make everyone poor. I jotted that down. I don't have the data in front of me, so I can't really challenge that statement. But I guess I'm worried when I hear things like that, because if someone with $10 billion is made 20% poorer, they're worth $8 million. You know, if someone worth $100,000 is made 20% poorer, they're worth $80,000, and it impacts those at the bottom a lot more than those at the top. And so often in these conversations, like I agree with Chewy, you know, we get a tax break of $10 a week or $15 a week, which doesn't significantly change our lives, but pooling that amongst 2 million taxpayers could actually change something in government policy, in theory. So it's I guess, as always, Louis, the devil's in the details, eh? So when you say it would make us all poorer, my response, which is probably unanswerable today, is how much poorer, and how would it affect those who are most vulnerable? And they're sort of the questions I would always ask.
Yeah, maybe I didn't phrase that right. I mean, the concern is, again, that tax changes have an effect on productivity. And if we destroy our national productivity, that's when everyone's made poorer. So what determines how wealthy you are or how much you earn? It's not actually, the primary determiner is not how much tax relief you personally are given. It's actually the productivity of our country as a whole, and how productive you are in your hourly wage at your job. The tax system does not determine that. The tax system can reduce that level of productivity by destroying incentives. But if we want to be more productive, we need to just make sure that we're an attractive place for people to invest from overseas, and that we don't have regulations that are completely absurd that get in the way of people being productive.
Yeah. All right. I feel like we've kind of come full circle back here to about productivity versus what you guys are doing. Someone's just mentioned this, though, as well. A couple of comments that have come while we've been talking, Louis. Emperor says, my incentive to earn 61% more is higher than the disincentive. So earning 61 cents out of the dollar is better than not doing it and earning 0 cents in the dollar, I guess is what they're saying. And a-hole atheist just said, just did the math. This guy represents 4.5% of eligible voters. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's the case. But
every day.
It is interesting to think about that. And, you know, I hear Taxpayers Union, and I think about unions as often representing the vulnerable, those who are in need, you know, the Amazon workers or that kind of stuff. But from this conversation today, it seems what I've clarified for me is the people that you're representing. I'm not saying this is bad. This is what you've told us are wealthier, typically property owners, and subscribe to your services, the right word, your ideas, that thing as well.
Yeah,
which
they feel represented by us.
But for me, puts a different spin now for me. No, I'm not saying you guys are spinning. You guys have been honest and blunt about it, but puts a different criteria around when I receive, and I do receive stuff from you guys and read it thinking, well, this is looking after wealthy homeowners. This is who these people are mostly speaking for. So yeah, but look, it's been great talking to you.
If I can just add a final word, I would say that we do what we do because we believe in it. And the fact that we've found 170,000 people who are willing to sign up to our cause, regardless of what income bracket they're in, that's great. Yeah. That's great from our perspective. For me, I just feel privileged to be able to do my job, to fight for causes that I believe in this case, smaller government, more freedom, lower taxes, and so on. So it's not as though I have wealthy people ringing me up telling me what to do.
Oh, look, no, don't get this. Don't get me twisted. I'm not. That wasn't any kind of criticism or jab at the end. It was just me.
Sure. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Yeah, but let me just say, okay, well, we're about to wrap up, and we do need to go because we've got the president of the RSA coming on shortly. But let me just leave us all with this. And look, I won't cut you off, Lou, if you want to respond to it. I do think, and I've said this before on the show, the idea of smaller government is bullshit. It's a bullshit argument because no one should be advocating for bigger government or smaller government. We should all be advocating for better government. So this idea that smaller government is better is utter horse shit, in my opinion. Nothing to do with you because a lot of people say it. because sometimes bigger government is needed. And I used the example just the other day of in the US when the BP oil refinery blew up. You know, the staff had been reduced to, the inspectors had been reduced to one worker for all the oil refineries. That was an instance where that government department needed to be bigger. It didn't need to be smaller. Smaller is not always better. What's better is better. And I really would hope that groups out there who are using that would change their verbiage and start advocating for better government, not smaller government, because smaller government's not all, it is the answer sometimes, but it's not always the answer. You can respond if you want to that, because that's my thoughts.
Not always the answer. We'd say often the answer. But otherwise, let's not get down into the rabbit hole.
All right, Louis. Hey, look, thanks so much for joining us. The campaigns manager for the Taxpayers Unions, Louis Houlbrooke. Louis, hopefully we'll talk to you again, especially in the lead up to the election. I'm sure this will be a hot button issue, and it would be really good to have a chat with you again about these things.